Yeah, now let's see.
And now, here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to Shaping Success. We are back. Thank you for the heart, Pizza J. Appreciate it. We are back in the saddle, it seems like, although I'm like sitting over here trying to look through things. Last week we had a little technical difficulty, so we didn't get it over on YouTube. I did post it up on YouTube. It just doesn't look like it normally did, which is what it is. But oh, I did freeze for a second. What the hell is going on here? Oh well, who cares? We're on TikTok.
Yep, you did.
We're on TikTok.
Cool.
So, anyway, sometimes there's a little bit of internet connection. There's a little bit of issues that we run into, which is technical. And it was funny how Robert this morning is like, yeah, I don't expect much. And we don't expect much. That's just kind of the way it is. Sometimes those technical difficulties cause problems. And part of the thing that I just did when that started to happen was I realized it goes back and forth. Mr. Musk's Starlink works sporadically. A hardwired connection's always been better, but for some reason it likes a Wi-Fi connection, and I've got the modem sitting right there. So anyway, Robert, what's going on, man? Good morning.
Man, it's a beautiful day. I was having a great conversation with an amazing lady last night who was kind of helping me through something because my life has went off script, right? It isn't doing exactly what I wanted it to do. And so I laughed because, the 7-time Super Bowl champion Tom Brady got a chance to be a broadcaster for this time for the weekend, right? And I think it was the New York Times said he's not a Super Bowl broadcaster yet, right? His first time out, right? They're expecting him to be a Super Bowl quality broadcaster, right?
Yet.
And it's just that, and they said he did really well when he went off script, right? And I went, yeah. And it's funny because we talk about that in life. What you've got plans, right? And the joke is if you want to hear God laugh, tell me your plans, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all have plans, but life seems to go off script. And if it goes off script in one or two things, you're kind of okay, right? But when it goes like crazy Ivan, it's off on every. That's when you start going, I'm not in love with this chapter, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what you're trying to do. And I was thinking about him as he was trying to, gosh, what do you do when you put a mic in front of you, which I don't like?
Mm-hmm.
Put a mic in front of you and 50 million people are watching, right? And they're critiquing everything you say, right? They're critiquing your hair. They're critiquing, I mean, come on, man. You know how people are.
He's going to get critiqued on everything he does no matter what, which I think is stupid because if you think that he did shitty this week, just wait till next week. And I didn't watch it, and I don't know what he was doing, but I can tell you one thing: that guy does not accept anything but perfection. So it may be something that takes a little while, but it may not be. I kind of wonder, like I haven't watched NFL football since the Super Bowl, and I don't plan on watching any probably until the Super Bowl. But what I find funny about it is that you think I guess the last time I heard about it was like when Tony Romo became a broadcaster. Supposedly he was really good, but then I think I heard last year that he was crappy. Like they don't like him again. So I don't know. I mean, it's like, do you think that those people sit there before they decide they're going to do it and practice forever? Even though the first time is going to be nerve wracking. What's up, Carl?
Yeah, and what the whole point of having Brady or Romo in there is real simple. They have a knowledge of the game behind the scenes. They know how the sausage is made, and they can talk about that, right?
Yep.
And that's what Romo was really good about. Romo was saying, oh my gosh, look at the defense. Okay, the tight end's going to be open in the flat.
Yep.
I know what they're running. He literally would look at him, and he was right. He knew exactly what they're running, and he knew exactly what would be open. Because if you're a student of life or student of a game, right? The difference between life and a game is simple. And this is why game theory is a bunch of hooey. Because a game has rules and parameters, and they're fairly well set, right?
Yep.
Life doesn't. When you go off script in life, you can go way the hell off script in life, right? There's these rules and stuff in games and limitations. In life, there isn't any.
Yeah.
It can just absolutely flip upside down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about people like in the Ukraine, for example, right? Life was one way one day, and then the next, you were being shelled.
Right.
So exactly how do you go off script when somebody has artillery inbound, right? So I mean, this is the way life is constructed, and we try to make games and try to make them interesting and create drama and all this kind of stuff. But the reality is, games have finite rules.
Right.
Yes, referees make mistake and all that kind of stuff, but it's still within a given constraint. Life is not that way. So you kind of have to show up. And even I think so much about all the times that I've kind of been in life or death situations, there was still defined rules like aerodynamics, right? How fast you fall, all
Yeah.
these kind of things are all still within these parameters, right? And life is acceptable to the point where I know how to fix it. I can practice for anomalies, right?
Right.
If I'm parachute jumping, there's only so many malfunctions that can happen, right? From
Hmm.
bird strike to, and there's ways around them. Life's not that way.
Yeah.
Life has an infinite number of opportunities for you to throw curves at you, right? And you can't actually practice for anomalies. You can't say, hey, when I get, like, for example, if you got to go from point A to B with your car and you've got traffic or whatever, there's
Yeah.
all kinds of ways you can kind of get around it, right? But there's certain places that you're going that there are no options, right? You've got to go down Route 6 or whatever the heck it is, right? That's it. That's all you've got. And so you've got to, deal with whatever traffic or something. But imagine when you're in a city and you've got infinite number of opportunities to get from point A to point B that you could route around. Life is kind of like that. You don't know how many infinite opportunities. And here's the thing. If it's just about you going from point A to point B, you're only billiard balling, so to speak, like a game of pool off of the people that are on the street. But life, theoretically, you can billiard ball off of 8 billion people.
Yeah.
That's a lot of difference, a lot of opportunity for strangeness, if lack of a better word.
Yeah. I'm thinking as you're talking about it, I'm thinking about like trying to tie this into something else that I made a post about yesterday. And it's funny because I sit there and I think about that. Like, I know how you are. Like, I get it because we kind of think a lot alike on a lot of things. And so it's tough because you have this plan, right? Just like you said, like you tell God your plan and then throw it out the window because he's going to do whatever you want, for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the problem is that you and I like to have control of the situation. And the reason we like to have control is because we've tried to take out all those variables and make it so that it is what we need it to be. However, just because you take them out of your mind doesn't mean that they're not going to be there because you can only control you. So you can control all these things that have these variables like a math problem, right? There's a couple ways to answer it, but there's only one right answer. And so to get there, you try to find the most efficient way for yourself. And it's funny when people they throw that wrench in there and you look at it a couple different ways. Number one, you look at it like, I hate this. It's uncomfortable. I don't like it, right? But then that uncomfortable thing has made it so that you had to figure out another way to do it, which also gave you a way to be better at your craft, if that makes sense.
No, that's exactly correct. And we all realize that the uncomfortableness is growth.
Yep.
The pain is a lot of times growth. And that's very difficult because what I guess we try to do is we try to decide when we're going to have the pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to decide that you want to, upset one apple cart in your life. And you inadvertently upset every apple cart in your life. So you're trying to figure out how to deal with all those. And it's not that you're unhappy, like depressed or something. It's just you're frustrated because you're like, okay, what do I need to add to this equation to make this work? It's like your coffee in the morning, right?
Yep.
It's really weird. I moved places and I moved 100 miles, but the water quality has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so my coffee has changed its taste.
Right.
Because of the water. So now I'm like, that's not as good as it used to be. Okay. So, because I have two or three different choices of these Italian coffees.
Right.
And so the bold actually tastes better now here than the other one does. And so you kind of laugh after a while because you just got to keep adjusting, right?
Yep.
Adjusting and adjusting and adjusting. What you're always trying to figure out and what I get frustrated at is what's the input that I need to add? It's like me, had a parachute failure, right? I know what to do. right? You just go through these steps.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't, if the steps don't solve the problem, you cut away and pull your reserve. And if your reserve doesn't work, you don't care, right? It becomes irrelevant. But you have steps, and that's what you're trying to figure out in life is, what do I need to add to this situation? What do I need to do? And that's when it gets frustrating because you go, I don't know what to do. And everything I'm doing doesn't seem to be working.
Right.
So that's when I get frustrated. That's when you're trying to dial it up, and you can see people trying to make those adjustments, whether they're quarterbacks on a Sunday football team or whether they're us just trying to get through. Or, think about it with kids, right?
Yep.
You had 2 kids.
Mm-hmm.
I had 4. I raised 5. Parenting is not the same for any child.
Nope.
You've got to continue to change and morph along the way. And when I had so many, I was just like, I got really comfortable at looking at the child and figuring out what they needed. Yeah. Right. But it's real hard from 1 to 2, isn't it?
Oh yeah. I mean, you look at it like we're struggling right now as you're talking about that. It's like we're struggling. Like my son right now, it is 5:15 here, but he's been up since 4:30. I got up out of bed at 4. Like I set my alarm for 4:15. I get up, I go through my emails, go through, some of social media, those types of things, drink coffee. That's my unwinding to get ready for the day, like the work, like here we go. And now I got to go do the work. And so what really throws me off is when he decides that he's not going to go to sleep, right? He's not going to sleep through the night. He's not going to do whatever. I get out of bed quietly because he won't sleep in his bed. He gets up in the middle of the night. He comes to our room, and my wife and I have this rule that he's not sleeping in our bed. So he's going to sleep beside our bed. He's not sleeping in the bed if he gets up and he comes in there. Well, last night he started out in the room. Like he was not sleeping in his bed. And so we put him there. Well, I get up this morning at 4:15, quietly walk out, close the door quietly. And a couple minutes later, he comes stomping out in the room. And so he doesn't want to go back to sleep. I'm like, dude, where are you going to sleep? You're going back to bed. It's 4:15. My daughter was never that way. So we have to figure out a way to keep him in his bed. We have to figure out a way to keep him asleep so that we don't lose sleep. And we've gone through so many different things. Magnesium lotion. We've tried giving him, they have these little nighttime gummies, and you can't give them too many of those because if you do, it can cause problems in their sleeping patterns. So it's like you try that. You try all these little things to get them to sleep through the night, and none of them are working. And we're like, what do we do? So the compromise that we've come up with is, here you go. Now, my wife has to work this morning, so she's getting in the shower. She's in the shower right now, getting ready for work. And I had to go in there and go, he's sitting on a chair watching Paw Patrol on his iPad. I got to go do this. Because it was like a game time decision. It's like, either I sit there with him and tell you, hey, sorry, it's not going to fly, or I tell her that. Like, these are the compromises that we have come up with to make these things work. And it's just, you can't control it. And I'm trying to figure out a way to make it happen, but he's going to live here for another, 15 years at least. We're going to figure this shit out. He's not sleeping in my bedroom until he's 18, But my daughter, she just sleep through the night.
Well, one of the biggest challenges is the difference between boys and girls, right?
Yeah.
And my daughter that I'm living with, she has 4 kids, so she completely understands it. She has 2 and 2 also, which is what I had. And boys are different than girls, and not every boy's the same, right? And not every girl's the same. So,
right.
And that's part of the frustration that you've reached, is because you're like, hold on, I've taken out my arsenal of tools.
Yep.
Okay, nothing's working. What do I do next? Well, you just keep trying to find a solution.
Right.
And that's where I was last night, I was at that frustration point. Right. And I told my friend, she said something, and she was very sweet. And she said, and I said, I'm struggling a bit. And she said, what is it? I said, I don't know. I'm not doing things that I want to. Mm-mm. I'm doing all the things that I don't. And I don't like being in that position. Right. I like doing things that I want. Listen, I understand sacrifice better than most. But here's the point. I don't want everything I do in a day to be something I have to do.
Right.
I want one thing to be my choice, right? Like I decide that I'm going to eat a bagel. I don't know, whatever it is, I want it to be my choice. And I kind of reached a point where everything I was doing was for something else or for someone else and I'm like, this is not fulfilling.
Right.
And how did I get here? Right? How did I get to a point where I don't know what to change? And so she was good about, she's saying, do this, do that. And she was good. She would just listen.
Right.
I just needed somebody to listen for a few minutes. And
Sometimes
like
you
I
need
said, she
someone to
really,
bounce that off of too, right? Like that's what's going to get you out of that. Like, well, I
yeah,
never really thought of it that way. Like because people have different thoughts on the whole situation.
yeah,
I was reminded of this because I made a post this weekend because there's some things that have been pissing me off. I don't want to get political, but I'm just going to talk in generalities about it because this is kind of the same situation. If you think about it in life, and I think that this is kind of ties into what we're talking about, but there's two sides of us, right? Like we like things to be in order, right? And we like
mhm,
decisions to be made, but we like to also be independent about those decisions, right? So I've been bugged by all the things that I see. Like I see this is a Trump Harris or Trump policy. Like now what they're doing is they think if they say it 3 times, this becomes policy, right? Like this is a Trump abortion ban. Trump abortion ban. Like she said it 3 times and then he goes back and he calls her crazy Kamala and they say it 3 times. Like I feel like if you watch and you start paying attention, they say it 3 times because they need to pound it into your head for you to understand that this is what this is. And so there are certain laws in this world that are like Beetlejuice, Nikki says.
Beetlejuice. Good job.
Yeah, that's
Good job,
perfect.
Nikki. Yep, Beatles. Don't say it 3 times.
Don't say it 3 times.
Yes.
But what's funny about it is like it's marijuana. Okay, so let's talk about marijuana. 30 miles from here, it's legal. Okay, where I'm sitting right now, 30 miles is from it's legal. In Idaho, they don't want it to be legal. Oregon is a very liberal state; they want it to be legal. I don't care if you do that. That's your choice, right? You go ahead and do it. But people want this order. They want someone else to do the thinking for them. And so I feel like there are these people who are like, give the federal government all the power that they want because then they can tell us what we have to do, right? And that's a state thing. Okay, so the state has decided that they're going to do this. It's still, isn't it? I don't know if if it's still, the federal government still has said it is illegal, but they don't enforce it, right? That's not a legal thing, but
Exactly.
they don't enforce it. So
Yeah.
anyway, we have that, right? And then we have this whole other thing where they're telling us that you can't do this or we're going to let the state decide. So they're letting the state decide that. And I like that. I like the reality that I live somewhere where that's where I want. That's what I don't want. Like I don't want these people doing this, doing that, blah, blah, blah. They're like, well, if it's a basic human right, then the federal government should step in and stop it. And so I disagree with that person. Like I want less. I don't want them telling me that I can do that. But we have this electoral college, like we've talked about before, where there's essentially 3 states that make the decision for the whole country, right? Like there's Florida, California. I think New York's one of the other ones that have this big old giant electoral college. And so if those 3 states decide that Harris should be president or Trump should be president, it's going to happen. We don't have a choice. But smaller states that don't, Texas is a pretty big one too, right? You got a lot of delegates as well.
Well, yeah, it's actually the 4 states are Texas, New York, Florida, and California. What happens is California and New York go Democrat, Texas and Florida go Republican. So that's what neutralizes the big stuff. So then you end up with the actual decision being made by Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and in Wisconsin,
Right.
because they're the only things that are up in the air. Everything else has been decided.
Yeah.
But like you said, those 4 big states, as long as they remain balanced, you've got a draw.
Yeah.
But if remember Reagan, he was the last Republican president to carry California,
Yeah.
and he stomped the other person because of it.
Yeah. So then when you think about that, okay. Gosh, we're getting restricted because we're talking about probably the green stuff. When you talk about that, and that's live on TikTok, it's one of the things that I've noticed about TikTok that drives me a little crazy is like it's not like it's a crazy thing there, but they're going to restrict it to whoever because of the fact that we're talking about the green stuff. What's funny about it is they say that, and then and you look at it. Okay, so now let's take California for example. There's 3 really big pockets in California, right, that decide for the whole state what they want. So
Right.
those 3 pockets: San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, big old giant population. There's more population in one of those states than there is in the whole state of Idaho. Okay, if you think about that, we have like 3 delegates. I don't know how many California has, but it's a lot. So there's those 3 pockets that make the decision for the whole state of California. So now in that you have the decision, okay? You can stay in California and you can deal with the policies that are being made by those 3 states, or you can leave. Okay? Same thing with Idaho, same thing with Texas, same thing with Florida. Like those are that's your choice. But if they make this sweeping regulatory thing for the whole country, you no longer have that choice. You're stuck with it. And so that's kind of the mentality. It's like you have those people, and I'm going to tie this back into what we were talking about, that want other people to make the decision for them because it's easy, right?
Yeah.
And you and I like the easiness sometimes of that, but we also are not afraid of a challenge. So you're being challenged right now, and you're okay with it. You don't like it. It's uncomfortable, but you're able to push through that. And so we have to, if you're going to be good at anything that you do, you have to go through some of that shittiness to get the goodness, right?
Yeah. And that's one of the things last night with talking to her was I really just needed to hear my own voice say what my problems were or what my challenges were. And so once I said them, I went, okay, that's not horrible. I can, let me deal with it a different way, right? It's me just beginning to understand, because what I did was I let my frustration cloud my judgment, because basically because the feedback mechanism that I was getting was always the same thing. It was, frustration, frustration, frustration. And in better terms, failure, 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 failure. And you're like, yes, I know how this works. I probably bit off more than I could chew, in the sense that I decided to do a bunch of areas and a bunch of change at one time. And that's hard, because now you're seeing lots of failure. It's not like you say, well, listen, I just want to take sugar out of my diet. Come on, that's one simple ass thing. It's no big deal, right? But when you try to do that and you move your locations, you change your university, you change it, you're like, wow, everything's changing. So sometimes life just deals you those kind of cards. You go off script, right? And you say, okay, it's like off-roading, right? We're going off-roading. There isn't a path there. We got to figure out a way to begin to cope and keep the mindset of being positive and proactive. I wasn't negative. I just felt off. And that's the problem.
Yeah, but the great thing about it, though, is like you recognize that and you figured out a way to make that happen. I mean, something as simple as fixing the wall behind me. I did that this weekend. I posted about it on a couple different platforms. I did it this weekend. Well, you know what was holding me back from doing it? Is that my wife is working on a day that I could do it, but I can't, because I have 2 kids sitting in there that I got to actually keep an eye on as well. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. We'll see how it goes. And next thing I know, I've got my 2-year-old knocking on the door. Where you at? So he's in here with me. I figured out a way to make it work. Like I let him be in here. And the problem is like in my studio, there's a lot of stuff that I have that I don't want him playing with. And he sees everything as a toy. So I found this weekend that, like I can do things with him, but I just didn't want to deal with the difficulties of having him running around in circles. I mean, he's 2. He needs some time. He needs to be able to do those things that he needs to do. So I sat him in the chair. I got it done. So it kind of.
I saw the picture of him in the room.
Yeah, he's sitting right there. He's getting ready to go, and that's why I left that in there to remind myself that like I can do stuff with him. I can figure it out, and I have a lot of stuff that I need to get done that I can't. I feel like sometimes I can't do with him, but I got a lot of stuff that's not going to get done if I think that way. So you have to figure that out, and then you bounce those ideas off of people. And I think that's one of the biggest things, you have to get out of your comfort zone. Sometimes you don't want to talk to other people about it, because here you are. And this is how I was in the beginning. And a lot was like, here I am preaching to people that you should have a positive mindset. But then when I get upset, I will, like, when my mindset goes negative, then I'd stop talking. I'd be like, you know what? I can't do this. Like, it's not. And the reality is that we all get in a negative headspace. And
that's just the thing. And that's what I said to her when I sent her a text. It was, I'm struggling. Yeah, it happens to me too, is what I said in the text. Because there are points when I feel like I run into a wall and I go, okay, that's the third time I've ran into the same wall. This isn't working. Let me stop for a second and recalibrate, right? Or in this case, my life is going off script. I got to write a new script. Somebody give me a pen, right? I need to do something different.
Yeah, and you know what's really cool for the audience to see, the Middle House podcast over on YouTube. He says, "Put them to work." That's what and that's kind of what it is. It's figuring out a way to make them work, but we have to find that workaround, and it may not always be the workaround that we want, because we want it to be one way, and we have that parameter of what we set on ourselves. But it is what it is. Yesterday, I read. I always say I read. Just know when I say I read a book, I'm listening to it, with the exception of yours, because it's not audiobook yet. So
I'm working on it.
I read those chapters every single day, or every right before, so that it's fresh in my mind about what we're talking about. But I was listening to the All In podcast. If you guys haven't listened to it, it's a great podcast with like 4 or 5 guys who have very differing opinions. Sometimes gets political. They have RFK on. They've had Trump on. They've invited Harris, but she didn't want to hop on there. They talk about a lot of things, and they were talking about this book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I listened to that whole book yesterday while I was working on my yard. I usually listen about 1.2, 1.5 speed. It's a little bit faster because sometimes they're just sitting there reading in this very low voice. And I started to realize that there are certain things that, with this 5 dysfunctions of a team, because I think of where I work as a team, there are some very dysfunctional things that go on in my workplace. And you could almost pinpoint every single person that they're talking about, but people are different and they want to argue, because argument leads to growth. And when there's a, like, say they were talking about like this marketing lady who said that this is the only way to do it. And they're like, well, there's also other ways to do it. And we think we should all be involved in this team choice, and we should have the conversations that are tough to have and not avoid the confrontation, because you're essentially dealing with the confrontation when you're talking to your friend, not that it's a negative, because we all look at confrontation as like, I don't want to have it. It's a negative thing, but you have to have that hard conversation. Sometimes you have to listen to what other people say, and it may not be the best thing to see it the way that someone else has it, but you may find out that maybe you're wrong.
Exactly. And that's the thing. I try to keep an open mind, and when somebody says X, and you also hate that somebody that you're so close to can quote you back to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's when she said, there's this really wise man who said. I went, oh geez, here we go. Right. Yeah. So that happens too. And that's when you go, okay, he is very wise. I should listen to him.
Yeah. And you think about, like, I think about tying this to social media, because the hard part is, like, we always sit here and we talk about like these negative comments. Like, I made that post yesterday that was talking about this political situation, and someone this morning posted, they posted a retort to it, and I'm sitting there going, well, that's your thought and it's great. Normally, like, I used to be like, no, you can't have a thought. I don't like your thought. It's not the same as mine. Delete it. And I started to think about it. It's like, you know what? There's nothing wrong with the debate. There's nothing wrong with it. And some people feel some way and some people feel the other way, and that's okay. But we have to be okay with that. We have to be okay with the confrontation. We have to be okay with, like, when someone in our job is not doing their job, being okay to say, hey, look, I don't think you're doing this right. And if we don't have that confrontation, we'll never get what we're looking for. We'll never have that question answered.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, well, great session. Appreciate you.
Great conversation. I appreciate y'all being here. We got restricted because we talked about the green broccoli. If you want to, make sure you go watch it on YouTube. The whole thing is there. They didn't restrict us there. But you can listen to it on Apple Podcasts. Please make sure that you like, share, and review. We appreciate you being here. You can subscribe anywhere you want. You can subscribe right here on TikTok if you want. But we do this 2 days a week. We will be going through Robert's book next time, Ars Victorious, if you haven't checked it out. Get your copy. We're almost done with it, but you can revisit all the sessions and work through the book with us on the platform. So thanks for hanging out with us.
Take care.